Keep watching and you'll see the value of opening preparation in classical over-the-board chess. I played this game in Graz in Austria against a much higher rated opponent, and we're going to see how opening preparation was decisive, I would say, in the result of this game. My name's Nathan Rose. I'm the author of Chess Opening Names, and I'm also an enthusiastic adult improver. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button and you won't miss out on any of the great stuff that I've got coming up. So for context, this was actually the second game of the day. It was a double round. I'd played in the morning as well, and I'd taken a tough loss in the morning. Now, normally what happens when you lose is that your next pairing should be easier. You should get someone lower rated than the person who just beat you. But that didn't happen in this case. The luck of the draw meant that I got someone even higher rated in the second game of the day. So I wasn't feeling too optimistic. I was also feeling quite tired going into the game. 2 games of classical chess in a single day is a lot. But let's see how it unfolded. So I've got white. Start with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. d4, the Scotch opening, captures on d4, and here there are 2 main lines that black can go for. One of them starts with bishop to c5, after which white should go bishop to e3. This is the classical variation. It's one way that black can play. Another thing that black can do is develop the knight, and this gives white the possibility of going for the Mises variation, which is super sharp and super theoretical. White can capture on c6, black captures back, and then you advance the pawn to e5. And then before moving the knight, the best move for black is to actually pin this pawn, so the knight can't be captured immediately. White breaks the pin, the knight goes here, you hit it again, and you get this situation where both sides find it quite difficult to develop. These queens are both quite awkward. One thing that black can do actually is pin again, so it's extremely sharp and one misstep can be fatal. But my opponent went for a very rare move, which is queen to h4, the so-called Steinitz variation, and this move is rare for a reason. It's almost a bit disrespectful to see this, to be honest, in a classical over-the-board game, because any player who plays the Scotch opening like me should have seen this before and should know what to do. Now this move, queen h4, is dangerous if white doesn't know what they're doing. But I would say that opening preparation is one of my strengths. So when I saw this, like I say, I almost couldn't believe it. It's the sort of move that you'd see in blitz, or maybe if you know that your opponent is not very familiar with the opening that's being played. So here I just get to show the refutation, which I've committed to memory. So the first point of queen to h4 is that the queen's attacking the pawn on e4. So knight to c3 defends, and now black plays bishop to b4, pinning this knight and therefore renewing the threat of taking the pawn on e4. And this is the first moment where white needs to find a move which is very hard to find if you haven't studied the opening theory. How do you defend this pawn? Well, you can't play f3 because that would be illegal. You can't actually move this pawn because of the threat against the king on that dark squared diagonal. If you play bishop to d3, then that would lose a piece. The knight would just get captured because this bishop blocks the queen's defense. You could play queen to d3, but then black renews the pressure on e4, and it's not actually easy for white to add another defender. Remember, this knight on c3 is pinned, so black's attacking it twice, and how can white defend it again? This is why this move, queen to h4, is played sometimes. It's very tricky if you can't find this move. The move is bishop to e2, which is what I played in the game. It's hard to find because you just give up this pawn. But you give it up in a way which is not going to be a check, right? If this bishop were not blocking the e-file, then this capture on e4 would be checked to the white king. So black captures, black's won a pawn, And here's another move which is important to find, and not perhaps an easy one to find if you haven't studied the theory. Knight to b5. So this is attacking the pawn on c7, and it turns out that black doesn't have a good way of defending this pawn. Let's look at black's options. If black tries to defend with the bishop, well, actually you capture on c7 anyway. The point being, if the bishop takes, then this knight is no longer pinned and the black queen drops. White should go on to win with an extra queen. And the queen can't really defend this pawn either. You could try queen to e5, but then white has another important follow-up, which is f4. And now where does the queen go? Well, it can't go to a square that keeps the defense of this pawn. You can't take the knight either because the bishop's guarding the knight, right? So the queen moves somewhere. Let's say it moves to c5, and then this pawn falls. And once the king moves, you win the rook. Maybe this knight doesn't get out, but even if the knight can't be saved, white's won the exchange. What if black tries to create a threat of their own? Captures on g3, right, attacking the rook. Well, again, white's got a refutation here. It's bishop to f3. All of this I had memorized, and I'd memorized it in my long-term memory. This is not something that I'd looked at right before the game had begun. The way that I'd memorized it was using Chessable. Through repetition over a long period of time, this is just something that I know, even if I haven't looked at it in the recent past. I'll link up to the video where I explain how I remember my openings with Chessable, because it came in very handy in this game. I mean, I couldn't have known that my opponent would go for such an unusual line. I had to have that knowledge ready just in case, and in this case I did. Let's get back to the game. Remember, I've just played knight to b5, and now black captures on c3. Black is hoping that I'm going to capture back with the knight. Now this would keep the queenside pawn structure intact, and it would also win a tempo against the black queen. The problem is that here black can capture on g2, and if you play bishop to f3 now, it's different, because now the black queen can just retreat, because by moving the knight back to c3, white no longer has this pressure on c7. That's why you capture with the pawn instead. So white's queenside pawn structure is a mess. White is a pawn down, but the compensation comes from the fact that now black has to play the move king to d8. It's the only way that black's got to defend this pawn on c7. So black has lost castling rights, and white can just complete development through simply castling. So we're going to see how to play when you're down a pawn, but you've got dynamic compensation. White's also got the dark squared bishop, very important. Black gave up their own dark squared bishop by capturing on c3 a couple of moves ago. So now black plays a6, a very natural move, kicking this knight away from the b5 square. But one concept that I always try and get across on this channel is that when you're facing a threat, whenever possible, it's good to respond with a bigger threat of your own. So you attack the knight, okay, I'll attack your queen. Black plays queen to c4, and here I had to stop and think. Now, one thing about studying an opening is that it's not just about memorizing the moves. By now, I am out of my memorized opening preparation, but it's also about knowing the thematic ideas, the thematic tactics. And I knew through prior study that at times the move knight to d6 can be an idea for white, because black is very underdeveloped. Now, I wasn't exactly sure whether it worked in this specific situation, so I did have to spend some time here thinking. I wasn't playing this from memory anymore, but at least I've got this idea in my mind. I think a move like knight to d6 is a very hard concept to even come up with if you haven't looked at it before. Now, it does work here, and it's the move that I played in the game after some thought, because the thing is that black becomes very, very weak on the dark squares. This is the main problem. The king isn't castled, and after the most natural way for black to continue their development, which is knight to f6, white is actually winning here after bishop to e3. This is the move I spent some time thinking about. I had considered, well, what if black had played knight to e7, which is the best move, in which case white is still better because you can continue to ratchet up the pressure with rook to e1. It's just very hard for black to get any of his pieces out. So white is a piece down, but it actually feels like black is the one who's down material. Look how hard it is for this bishop to get out. These knights are responsible for guarding each other, and there's always the threat of taking one of them and then coming in with a bishop here, maybe a bishop here. It's very difficult for black to play this. But after knight to f6, it's impossible for black to play this. Bishop to e3 comes with the threat of bishop to b6. And black can't stop this really. If you play queen to b5, well then you just kick the queen away and play bishop to b6 next move anyway. And I think it was after this move, bishop to e3, that my opponent finally realized just how much trouble he was in. He'd played that tricky queen to h4 line against the wrong guy. So he's trying to desperately block the e-file now. He can see that bishop to b6 is coming and his king is going to need to go to e8. So he puts the knight in the way, trying to hold on to some hope of holding this position together. Bishop to b6 is played anyway. King to e8, and now threatening checkmate. And it's again not easy for black to defend this, not at all. If you play knight here, well, you can just take this and you're renewing the threat. The queen can't defend the e7 square either in a good way, so now black has to play one of the saddest moves I've ever seen in chess, and that is the move knight to g8. Now, one thing that I'm still thinking here is to not relax. The game's not over. I mean, according to the computer it's over, but I still need to be accurate. I am still a piece down, remember, so it's important to finish these positions off. One possible defense that I was looking at was, what if, like, let's say I played bishop to c5, black could defend again with the queen. So I was trying to work out whether black was holding on here. It turns out that black isn't, but still, I wanted to prevent this idea. And it's for this reason that I played rook to e4, stopping the queen from swinging over to h4 to defend. So queen to b5, maybe now the queen's going to come over to g5 with the same kind of idea of adding extra defenders to e7. And now I play bishop to c5, again just continuing to put pressure onto the focal point, which is clearly e7. My plan's very simple. Just keep on adding attackers to the e7 square. Now the black king tries to run away, and here I play a move which switches the plan somewhat, right? I was targeting the e7 square, but I noticed after some thought that I can actually play rook to b4, and the black queen is trapped. This is what happens when you're so far behind in development, as black is here. I mean, he's got the bishop, rook, and the other rook on their starting square. The other knight had to go back to its starting square, remember? It's really only the queen that's developed. Meanwhile, my development is perfect. And these are the sorts of things that can happen when there's such a huge development differential. The only square that the black queen can go to where it's not going to be captured is a5. But of course then this fork wins the queen anyway. So back to the game. Black played knight to f5, trying to argue that if I take his queen, he'll take my queen. But after queen to f8 check, I escape the threat from the knight with check. He's got to play king to c7. I capture the queen, and with that, he's down a decisive amount of material. He's actually going to be down even more material pretty soon, because after you take back, you can push this knight away and pretty quickly win the rook in the corner as well. So no hope for black, and got the resignation. So what can be learnt from this game? Well, I think number one, don't play dubious openings in classical over-the-board chess. There's every chance that your opponent will know the refutation and will take great delight in showing it to you. And as a result, my opponent was forced into playing a move which you never want to play, a move like king to d8. Second of all, it's important to not only know the opening moves, as I did in this game, but to also know the thematic ideas. So once we got to this position, I knew through prior study that the knight to d6 tactic can work in certain circumstances. This would have been a harder move for me to discover if I hadn't studied it before. You're giving up a piece after all. So I found this move partly through prior preparation, even though I hadn't memorized the line exactly. After knight d6 and the eventual bishop to e3, the game was as good as over, and I was able to gain a victory over a much higher rated opponent. So I hope you learned something from that video. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please show your appreciation by giving it a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this one, and do drop a comment down below as well. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for watching. I'm Nathan Rose. Bye for now.